Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. Let's start with the weather for Riverside. Expect a high temperature today, reaching 68.6 degrees, with the low dipping down to around 52.8 degrees tonight, making for a mild spring day. Coming up on the show, we're examining the reasons behind the presence of a second United States aircraft carrier currently operating in the Middle East, and what that signifies for the region. Then, we'll turn our attention closer to home, exploring the ongoing debate and scrutiny surrounding California's strategies for managing and preventing wildfires. We will look into why the state's approach is currently under discussion. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. All right, for our first story this morning, things are certainly heating up in the Middle East, with the U.S. sending more naval power to the region. We have our national security reporter, Ethan, joining us now in the studio to break it all down. Ethan, what can you tell us about this latest deployment?
Grace, the big news is the arrival of the USS Carl Vinson, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, into the waters overseen by U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, which manages military operations in the Middle East and Central Asia. According to the Associated Press and AOL, the Vinson has joined the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group, which was already operating in the Arabian Sea and Gulf of Oman area. So we now have two full carrier strike groups there. That's a significant concentration of naval power. It's certainly making waves.
Two carriers definitely sends a message. Initially, there was reporting suggesting this move was timed specifically with upcoming nuclear talks with Iran. Can you elaborate on that connection?
That's right. Early reports, particularly from Associated Press correspondent John Gambrell, carried by outlets like Yahoo News and the Tribune Democrat around today, April 15th, explicitly framed the Vinson's arrival as a, quote, show of force, end quote, ahead of a planned second round of nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. These reports cited unnamed, quote, American officials, end quote, who apparently linked not just the carrier's presence, but also the ongoing U.S. airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, directly to applying pressure on Tehran during these sensitive talks.
And where do those talks stand?
Well, the first round reportedly happened in Rome. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, described them as having gone, quote, well, end quote, according to Yahoo News and the AP. But he also expressed typical skepticism about U.S. intentions. The location for the second round isn't set, though Iran apparently prefers Oman. The stakes are high. The U.S. has warned of potential military action if diplomacy fails, while Iran continues its nuclear program. U.S. Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff suggested the old 2015 deal framework might be a starting point, focusing on verifying Iran keeps uranium enrichment low, perhaps around 3.67%, and addressing missile development, as reported by Yahoo News, AP.
So, initial reports linked the carrier to pressuring Iran for these talks. But the official story seems a bit different now?
Exactly. More recent information, including updated reporting from AOL and analysis from Perplexity API sources we consulted, highlights the official * U.S. government and Department of Defense explanation. They state the primary mission for the USS Carl Vinson is focused squarely on countering the ongoing threats from Houthi rebels in Yemen and ensuring maritime security in crucial waterways like the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, that narrow choke point connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden.
Can you remind viewers about the Houthi threat?
Certainly. The Houthis are an Iran-backed rebel group controlling significant parts of Yemen. For months now, and escalating recently, they've been launching ballistic missiles, armed drones, and even using sea mines to attack commercial ships and naval vessels in the area, causing major disruptions to global trade. The U.S. has been conducting almost daily airstrikes against Houthi positions and capabilities since mid-March, as AOL noted, in direct response to these attacks. The official line, according to AOL and Perplexity API, is that the Vinson is there to bolster regional deterrence and protect shipping lanes, with no confirmed official link to putting pressure on Iran for the nuclear talks.
So how do we navigate these different explanations, Ethan? Unnamed officials linking it to Iran talks versus the official line focusing on the Houthis.
It's a complex picture, Grace. The discrepancy could stem from a few things. Perhaps initial journalistic interpretations based on the tense geopolitical climate, or those early reports relying on sources giving an unofficial, maybe even speculative, assessment. It's also possible the deployment serves a broader strategic purpose of signaling strength towards Iran generally, even if the ignored stated Tarrant's primary mission is the immediate Houthi threat. The initial AP reports were quite specific in linking the deployment and the anti-Houthi strikes to the nuclear file pressure, but the official Pentagon and government statements emphasize maritime security. It underscores the intricate mix of military posturing, active regional conflicts, and high-stakes diplomacy, all playing out simultaneously.
A very complicated situation indeed, trying to read the currents over there. Ethan, thank you for clarifying those different perspectives and bringing us the details from sources like the Associated Press, Yahoo News, the Tribune Democrat, AOL, and Perplexity API.
Anytime, Grace.
Turning now to California, where the state is trying to get ahead of what could be another devastating wildfire season. Joining us with the details is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, there's significant new funding being directed towards prevention?
That's right, Grace. According to reporting from Cal Matters, Governor Newsom just signed Assembly Bill 100 into law yesterday. This bill unlocks over $170 million specifically earmarked for wildfire prevention efforts.
$170 million is certainly a significant sum. Where is that money coming from? And what exactly will it be used for?
The funding actually stems from a larger $10 billion environmental bond that voters previously approved. Cal Matters notes this comes after those damaging fires in Los Angeles back in January, and increasing pressure to act before fire season really heats up. The main focus is on managing vegetation, thinning dense forests, clearing out flammable brush, and creating fire breaks, which are gaps in vegetation designed to slow or stop a fire's spread.
So, managing the fuel before it can burn. Where will these efforts be concentrated?
The Perplexity API provides a breakdown showing the money spread across several state conservancies. For instance, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy gets nearly $31 million. The California Tahoe Conservancy receives about $23.5 million, and the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy gets over $31 million. Cal Matters highlights that at least $85 million is specifically targeted for Southern California, with another $54 million for the Sierra Nevada region. There's also a specific $10 million allocation noted by the Perplexity API for CAL FIRE training infrastructure for the Karuk tribe.
It sounds like they want to get this work done quickly, especially before the peak season.
Absolutely. Governor Newsom also issued an executive order to fast-track these projects. Cal Matters and the Perplexity API report this order uses a prior emergency proclamation to suspend certain environmental regulations, including parts of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the Coastal Act. The idea is to cut through red tape and lengthy environmental reviews.
Suspending environmental regulations usually sparks some debate. Has this move faced any pushback?
It certainly has, Grace. Environmental groups like the Center for Biological Diversity mentioned by both Cal Matters and the Perplexity API are raising concerns. They argue that bypassing CEQA could allow potentially harmful logging projects to proceed under the banner of fire prevention without fully assessing the impact on forests, wildlife, and biodiversity. They believe the focus and the funding should shift more towards what's called, quote, home hardening, end quote.
Home hardening? Can you explain what that involves? It sounds like giving houses a suit of armor.
Not quite armor, but close. It involves making homes themselves more resistant to fire. Think installing ember-resistant vents, using non-combustible siding materials like stucco or fiber cement, and clearing defensible space immediately around structures or removing flammable plants and materials. Cal Matters reports these groups argue this offers more direct protection to communities with less environmental disruption compared to large-scale forest clearing.
So it's a debate between managing the wider landscape versus fortifying individual homes. Is one approach definitively better?
A task complex, and the Perplexity API notes that scientific evidence supports aspects of both. Overly dense forests are indeed more prone to severe fires, so thinning and prescribed burns, which are controlled fires set intentionally to clear underbrush, can reduce risk and improve forest health. But critics argue, as CalMatters points out, that embers blown ahead of a fire often ignite homes, making home hardening crucial. It seems the best defense might not be putting all your logs in one fireplace, so to speak.
What about the cost? Is thinning vast areas of forest more cost-effective than helping thousands of homeowners fireproof their properties?
Evaluating that is tricky, according to the Perplexity API. However, research cited by the Breakthrough Institute suggests large-scale fuel reduction can be very cost-effective. One study estimated treating 1 million acres annually could yield benefits nearly 4 times the cost. For home hardening, while effective for individual houses, its large-scale cost-effectiveness compared to landscape treatment isn't as well documented in comparative studies. Many experts, referenced by the Perplexity API, really advocate for a combined strategy at tackling the forest and the homes.
And all this is happening against a much larger backdrop of wildfire concerns, isn't it?
Definitely. Google News highlights wildfire risks across many U.S. states and internationally, fueled by drought and other factors. Here in California, CalMatters points to ongoing issues like potentially outdated utility, fire risk maps, evacuation challenges, and the huge costs of rebuilding S. Southern California Edison, for example, plans a $925 million rebuild after the LA fires, according to Google News. Plus, new CAL FIRE hazard maps put nearly 4 million Californians in risky zones, triggering stricter building rules. It's a massive, multifaceted challenge.
A complex issue with significant investment and ongoing debate about the best path forward. Chloe, thanks for breaking that down for us.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. A U.S. judge has ruled the White House acted unconstitutionally by barring Associated Press journalists from press events, citing viewpoint discrimination. Judge Trevor McFadden ordered the White House to reinstate AP's access, stemming from a dispute that began when the AP refused to adopt an administration name change for a geographical feature. Despite the court order, the White House reportedly denied AP journalists entry to a recent Oval Office event and has filed an appeal, seeking to restrict access while the case continues. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has frozen over $2.2 billion in federal grants and $60 million in contracts to Harvard University. The administration accuses Harvard of failing to adequately address anti-Semitism, particularly concerning protests over Gaza, and demanded reforms including faculty audits, merit-based admissions, a ban on face masks, and shutting down diversity programs. Harvard President Alan Garber rejected these demands as exceeding lawful authority. The move, which could jeopardize critical research, has sparked protests and a lawsuit from the American Association of University Professors, and appears part of a broader campaign targeting elite universities. In response to potential administration actions, a coalition of over 280 core Democratic groups has formed Democracy 2025. This multi-million-dollar legal effort aims to counter anticipated anti-democratic measures outlined in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 blueprint for a second Trump term. The coalition is tracking threats, like purging the civil service and rolling back rights, preparing swift litigation to protect civil rights, climate policies, and reproductive rights, building on a track record of successfully challenging the first Trump administration in court. Concerns are also rising among international students following widespread U.S. visa revocations under the Trump administration. Hundreds of students, including those at major universities like Harvard and Stanford, have had their visas canceled, sometimes reportedly for minor infractions or involvement in protests. Many are filing legal challenges, alleging a lack of due process. Unlike in the past, recent policy changes mean visa revocation now often terminates legal residency status, forcing students to leave the U.S. or risk detention, sparking fears this will deter future international enrollment. Finally, Mohsen Mahdawi, a Palestinian activist and lawful permanent resident, was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement during his scheduled citizenship test appointment in Vermont. Mahdawi, a Columbia University student active in pro-Palestine protests, was taken into custody by ICE agents. His attorneys claim the detention is unconstitutional retaliation for his advocacy and have filed a petition seeking his release. Vermont's congressional delegation has condemned the arrest, calling for due process. This follows the recent detention of another Palestinian student activist from Columbia. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.